Alright, we're live. Okay, this is going to be one hell of a different stream, but that's fine. Let me go ahead and send this around. I will probably edit this into an actual video once people show up. Hello, everybody. Probably get some people in. Oops, there is going to be a little bit of alt-tabbing where people can see everything that I'm tabbed into. So I'm going to have to stop using the alt-tab key, which is a shame, but I think I can avoid it. Just going to wait for a few people to get here. That way there's somebody listening. That way I have somebody I can explain stuff to. Ah, there we go. I did it again. People are going to be able to see my my desktop wallpaper now. At least it's nothing stupid or gay. Alright, 0 watching. That's to be expected. It's 9 a.m. on a Friday. 9 a.m. on a Friday. Also, this is public. Let me switch this up. I wonder if people are getting... Okay, we got 3 people in. Hello, guys. So... let me talk a little bit about this. What is this autism you're seeing on the screen? If you are on my Discord, you probably noticed that a couple days ago I went ahead and posted an announcement. And I said, hey, if anybody would like to join this strategy game, it's on another Discord, DM me about joining. And a few people DM'd me about joining. But I was also a little vague on what exactly we were doing. And I figured I'd show you guys what I'm working on. Because I think that this is not just something that will be restricted to an autistic Discord sphere, but could also be used in a very basic indie-esque game. Alright, now my girlfriend knows a little bit of coding, more of a code monkey than I am, and we might work on this. Because what I have in front of you is a system for fleet battles, strategic fleet battles in a space, sci-fi war game. All right? And how it works... Cream, why are you starting a new project every few weeks? You never finish any of them. Listen here, Cream. Listen here. I do projects and I do things that are enjoyable, okay? If something isn't enjoyable, I stop doing it. But this is one of the things that is enjoyable for me. We did this with another game, and the game failed due to drama, due to people, being people. That's kind of an issue with some of these Discord games, is that there's a lot of tendency to rage quit. But if it wasn't for that, that game would have continued onwards, because we had a basic system like this. No, not really like this, but same general idea. Doing fleet battles in, this is paint.net, so this is very simple, but simulating fleet battles in a, strategy game instead of just doing battle calculators. Because battle calculators, in my opinion, are some of the worst parts of strategy games. Both you're doing with your friends, right? You got your autistic Excel spreadsheet, or you're doing it in a game. For example, EU4 uses battle calculators. That's why EU4's wars feel very... they just don't feel fulfilling to me, because there is a bit of strategy, but it's all campaign movement strategy. You don't get battle strategy. That is why I'm a bigger fan of the Total War games. I like Total War because you have campaign strategy and you have battle strategy. So you're thinking ahead, and you have to think, can I actually win this battle? It's not just, is the auto-resolve battle calculator going to give me a win in this battle? And that's a big flaw in the newer Total War games, because you can just spam auto-resolve. You can create an army that is really shitty in manual resolve in controlling the battle, but is great in auto-resolve, and that's a big issue with the modern Total War games. So what I'm trying to do with this little Discord project is I'm trying to do a few things. Now, I write fiction. Most of you don't know anything about that because this is a history-focused channel, but I do like writing fiction, and I've been writing sci-fi recently, and this game does take place in the sort of sci-fi universe I'm trying to put together for the fiction I'm writing. What I'm writing right now, a short novella, is based heavily on what we came up with in the last game. Which was a lot more absurd, and I've turned down the absurdity for that fiction. But this is a good way to prototype how things play out when you have actual people in the fray, and it can make situations that you can then write about and expand upon and flesh out a lot more interesting and a lot more engaging, in my opinion. But what I've done here for this game, this is the heart of this game. Is the fleet battle system, and there's inspiration all over the place for it. I've been playing some Battlefleet Gothic recently. I'm not very good at it, but that's where I've come up with some of the stuff on screen, specifically the Cone of Fire. In the last game we did, which unfortunately I'm not in a position to pull up any examples with how I have this stream jury-rigged, it was only a radius of fire. So let me explain, let me quickly explain what all of this means, because it might seem like really unnecessarily complicated, but this is as simple as it can get for giving all the information somebody needs in a Paint.net format without making me drag my hair out, right? Because none of this stuff is on a different layer other than the HP bar. Everything else is on the same layer. So for your destroyer image, you have all of this information here, which means there's no worrying about me having to move radiuses with ships, which was a big issue last time. Everything is on the same layer. This is the graphic. Not this. This is the graphic. The only thing overlaid is health, because if you move this thing, like if I move this thing counterclockwise a little bit, the health will be harder to read, because part of our health system for this game is using these little, squares. Now, the text won't be in a battle, but the squares will, and that will give somebody a general idea of how their ships are doing. But yeah, let me stay zoomed in here so I can explain my reasoning with this. You have a ship graphic that gives you an idea of the size of the ship, that also gives you an idea of orientation. Orientation is further seen by the cone of fire of the main gun, which is at the front of the ship. Then you have two blue circles. I want to look at these first before the red circles. The blue circles, which are the same color as the color of the ship graphic, which is the color of whatever faction or nation this is associated with. These two circles, the full circle and the half circle, are movement range. So they're not centered around the center of the ship. They're centered around the very front of the ship, meaning that it's faster to move straight ahead than it is to move backwards, and it's faster to move directly straight ahead than it is to move in a sort of diagonal direction where you need to turn your ship to face that direction. Then you have this half circle, which is for basically maxing out your engines for a turn to go a little faster, just a little faster, to give a boost that you might need in maneuvering against your enemy. And that is going, for the game right now, I still need to do some test runs, but that's going to be a once every 3 turns thing. So what is this big red circle? What is the firing cone? Is a firing cone. That's pretty obvious and self-explanatory. And I think everybody should know what this red circle is. Those are for defensive batteries. That's for point defense systems. That is for guns and turrets that are all over the ship, for shooting down fighters, for shooting down missiles, and for very close to the enemy combat. But these are mostly support weapons and, anti-missile weaponry, etc. Then we have, of course, missiles. And missiles, because they're guided, can be fired in any direction around the ship, which means that even if you are outmaneuvered by your enemy, if your enemy is like here and your firing cone, it's over here, you can still launch missiles at that enemy if you want. But missiles are a material item. And if you don't have the logistics, you might not want to use all of your missiles unless you really need to. Because while this cannon is based on the engine, and since it's the future, you don't need fuel for these ships. They're powered by nuclear reactors or cores or whatever space magic you want to come up with. That also powers the main death cannon at the front of the ship. So you don't have to worry about rearming for your front gun, but you do need to worry about rearming for your guided missiles, which means, oh, I'm going to shoot 50 missiles at the enemy. Except I won't have missiles until I have a chance to rearm. But I'm in enemy territory, which means I probably won't have a chance to rearm unless we defeat the enemy here, but we don't defeat them in a way where there's nothing to take, right? So I want there to be a lot of strategic depth in this game, a lot of things to consider for the players, but I also want it to be easy to read and simplistic. And I think this is a good balance between simplicity and between complexity. There's just enough here so that you have all your information, you have a bunch of options, there's a bunch of tools at your disposal, so things can play out nicely. What engine am I using, Vlad? Vlad, I have not put any of this into any engine right now. This is for a Discord server that is running separate to my community Discord, where we're doing everything turn-based, we're doing everything by hand. Think of this right now as a tabletop game, but instead of being on a tabletop, it's on a paint.net canvas. I do not have any coding knowledge myself, my girlfriend does, and I have time to sync, but probably not that much time to sync. But I have been talking to my girlfriend about this because I don't think this would be very hard to represent in a game. And I think the systems would actually be better in a real-time environment than a turn-based environment, because turn-based has its disadvantages. Real-time is harder for the player to control because you can't take your time thinking out every move, but it is a lot more dynamic, and it does introduce a lot more possibility for maneuver and mobility. Yes, Metal, that is some Legend of the Galactic Heroes in the thumbnail, and I did hit Alt-Tab recently, so my desktop wallpaper's from that show too. The inspiration for making this little autistic Discord game and for potentially, running with this is also Legend of the Galactic Heroes, in the sense that if you notice, the ships are like the ships in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, where their front-facing guns are very important. Now, I've read a bit of the books, and there isn't really any explanation for the ships front-facing Napoleonic style yet. I've only read the first book. But in this, the reasoning is that the cannons are so large that they're running through the entire ship from the back to the front. So you can't have them facing in multiple directions. They wouldn't be as effective because ships aren't very durable in this game. I've made them durable enough that people aren't punished unfairly for mistakes. Let me scroll down to the damage model. I'm going to scroll down some more complicated designs. As you're going to see, you have the implementation of this yellow circle. What's that yellow circle? It is for fighters and boarding ships, for deploying them. Now, yeah, okay. I'm a little too zoomed in. I think that's better. That way you guys can see all the text. Yeah, alright, that's fine. It doesn't have to be pretty. But down here I put the damage ratings. And 3 damage seems pretty puny, but even the Destroyer has 4 of these guns, which means that 4 hits, that's a lot of damage. A lot of damage. You can only take 3 hits in this Destroyer. Plus, there's more than the main gun coming after you. There's missiles, there's fighters, there's railguns in a limited capacity, there are higher charged variants of the neutron cannon, they're shorter. There's the fact that, if you get too close to an enemy, they can hit you with their immediate batteries, which doesn't do much damage, but if you're already softened up, one thing can lead to another. But I just wanted to do a stream to talk about this because I think that there's a severe lack of real, not real, but of in-depth strategy games. What do I mean? Total War has a very kind of bad campaign. The campaign is not detailed enough. The campaign in the more recent games is even less detailed and relies on bullshit difficulty. The battles are great, though. It's like Total War has a campaign, and the campaign is serviceable, and the campaign is good because of the fact you have the battles. But if it didn't have the battles, Total War would be a very mediocre game. EU4 is the same way. EU4 has a pretty good campaign. There's a lot of stuff you can do. There's depth there. But the wars have always been, in my opinion, very, very boring. It is following a meta to the T. Whenever you are relying in a strategy game on calculators and not player input, you're going to have a meta appear. Now, in other games where you have direct control, a player has direct control, there will be a meta of what's better and what isn't better. But that meta is limited by how a player can implement those sort of skills into the game. For example, in Total War Warhammer, I would say that the flying units, flying cavalry, like the Pegasus Knights and I forget what the other ones are called, but the flying cavalry of the Bretonnians, some of the best units in the game. But if you're not able to micro them, because you're just not good at microing those flying units, you can't really tap into that meta's potential, even though that's how you kind of make a doom stack in that army. Plus, with player control, there's just a lot more variables at play, and things can play out a lot differently, and I just can't stand auto-resolve battle calculators. The only place where auto-resolve battle calculators kind of work is in something like a World War II strategy game. So Hearts of Iron 4 has a lot of issues, especially with the fact that you can develop one meta, and with that meta, you can basically guarantee yourself victory. But the reason that Hearts of Iron 4 is even fun is because of the fact that it has a player skill-based micro game. That micro is entirely based on the player's input. It's based on encircling the enemy. It's based on scanning the front line and finding openings where you can attack. And in a multiplayer game, it's a lot more fun because you can't pause. You really have to be on the top of your toes. Now, is it an accurate simulation of World War II? I don't know about that. But it is a good exercise of strategy. It's a good exercise of tactics. It's fun, and it's skill-based. So I think Hoi, even though I don't really like Hoi 4, I like Darkest Hour a little more, I do like the fact that Hoi 4 has the micro to it. Because of the fact it has micro, it's much more of a strategy game. Let's continue. Then you have the fact that strategy games, where you have these big grand campaigns, put you in a position of a demigod, alright? Think about it like this. You're not the leader of the nation, you are just the nation. You're this sort of observer or guiding hand when you're playing these strategy games. That's why, out of all of Paradox Interactive's games, CK2 is a much better game, or at least much more interesting game than Paradox's other titles, because of the fact that it tries to implement characters. It tries to implement people into the game. It makes you deal with people's flaws and their strengths. The problem with CK2, though, is that it's all based on calculations. It's all based on stats that you, as the player, have a demigod-like ability to read. You're able to read a number value of what somebody thinks about you. That is a concession, I guess, to the fact it's a game, but what I've always wanted in a strategy game is a game where you play as a specific character, like you're in an RPG, where you have campaign strategy, battle strategy, and internal politicking. You have to deal with what other people think of you, what the general public thinks of you, what your military thinks of you, what your rivals and what your allies think of you, where you're basically dealing with both both people, campaign strategy, which is like logistics, and battle strategy, which is like tactics. That would be my dream game. The problem is that strategy games are made as if they're sandboxes, and because they're made as sandboxes, they rely on predictable computer programming. They rely on calculators. They rely on random chance, random events. I think that the ideal strategy game to give a player a sense that they're actually leading something is to do a scripted campaign. And because it's scripted, a lot of people will be like, whoa, 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 whoa. But then it's going to be linear. It might even be more predictable. The problem is that people will play games that are linear and have these scripted campaigns, and they'll just exploit walkthroughs, for example. Meanwhile, sandbox strategy games are very replayable. But still, I think if you had a ton of different, not linear, but definitely scripted, pathed out, narrative-based strategy game campaigns, it would play out a lot more interestingly and a lot more realistic than sandbox strategy. Hoi Force Combat is pretty fun, but its factory system is way too complex. Oh, I'll show you guys something in a second. I mean, this is just a general stream where I'm trying to talk about something a little different. Strategy games are kind of like strategy games. They're kind of relevant because we do talk about war and strategy on this channel. And I do think that strategy games are basically the only thing that I can just play continuously. They don't get old. They get old after a while, but I get bored of other games very quickly. So they've always held my interest. Yeah, Metalima, you either have one or the other. You can't have enough depth in both diplomacy and battles. Yeah, and that is the problem. That's the fundamental problem with strategy games, is they either go one way or the other. Divinity Dragon Commander Cream. I'll have to check that out. Because if that has everything that I'm saying, I definitely like to see it. I definitely like to give it a play. I hope it's not too expensive, because I'm kind of in a hole. Well, I'm not in a financial hole necessarily, but my dad is, so that means my money's being drained recently. But I'll definitely check out Divinity Dragon Commander. But that's the reason that we're doing this Autistic Discord game, is because of the fact that you're able to have both. You have to deal with other people, their ambitions, the fact they might agree or might disagree with you, because everybody involved is a player. There are NPCs, but the NPCs are incredibly limited. Basically, in the game, as the game master, there's only going to be a few things for the people to deal with at the beginning of the game, so that they can have some PvE, player versus enemy, fleet battles, and ground combat exercises, which will let them know how to play. That way, when they go against another player, they're not a fish out of water. You know what I mean? But the fact that everybody's a player means that things are much more unpredictable. You have to deal with actually asserting yourself over people or persuading people, even if it's just a little game. It's not real life or anything like that. But you do have some things happen that would never happen in a strategy game. Like, I played a lot of Stellaris, and I was really hoping that I could incite like a galactic civil war in my Stellaris game, because I wanted to play out a galactic civil war. That never happens in Stellaris. Stellaris has no systems to incite a civil war, like, ever. And that's another thing with sandbox strategy, is that I have been saying, it's predictable, it has all these systems that, will just kind of like, you can predict them. Specifically, I was talking about CK2, right? CK2, it does so many things well, but it is predictable, it is cheesable. You can really cheese CK2 easily, and these characters that are supposed to be less predictable are still predictable, because you have number values. You know exactly their personality and their traits. None of the information is vague. You don't have to invest any time or energy into getting information on other characters. You just get their entire character sheet like you're playing D&D. Yeah, but that's an issue, Cream, is that you only have that machine uprising. I'm talking about like organic rebellion, organic revolution, organic pretenders, right? Like something in CK2 where, hey, this guy doesn't like you, he's going to rise up and try and take the throne from you. And the fact that CK2 even has that, now of course you have to fill in the blanks because it's a sandbox environment, but it still makes it a more interesting game than EU4 or Stellaris or anything like that. I feel like these sandbox strategy games could be made into sort of ultimate strategy games, but I think it's very difficult to do that. There's so much stuff the game would have to be doing behind the curtains, behind the screens, and we'll probably have that in the far future, But if I were to sit down and make a strategy game, if after I'm done with this Discord autism, I look at these systems that we've made for the fleet battles and for the ground combat, and I thought to myself, this can translate to something that either I or a few people could actually sit down and code, I'd want to make it part of the framework of a campaign-based campaign in the sense of the word, that it's a non-linear but narrative-focused, character-focused campaign where you have a preset scenario that you're dealing with. Because part of what's so interesting about World War II strategy games when they get it right, Hoi 4 is more of a sandbox World War II strategy game because of the fact that it is full of these alt history options that make things a lot less predictable and crazy, man. That's cool. I like that. I like the fact that there's the option there. But World War II strategy games, everybody knows about World War II, and if you read about it, you know certain decisions, and you know what could have been done better, for example. So in a World War II strategy game, you're not doing things alt history necessarily, but you're doing things and seeing if your strategy to accomplish the same goals is successful or unsuccessful. Yeah, if Stellaris had character intrigue like CK2, it would be great. Now, I did see a game on Steam, like an indie game with pretty bad art, about playing like a galactic emperor, where your character is the galactic emperor, and you have to deal with court intrigue, and you have to deal with admiral characters, and it seemed like it might be pretty decent. But again, that's just campaign. That's just campaign intrigue. I like the idea of having Total War-esque player-controlled battles plus character intrigue. Basically, take all of the good from all of these strategy games out there and mix it all together until you get something that's really good. Now, why don't we see that? I don't know. I think it's because Paradox isn't going to do anything like that. I don't think Paradox are good game developers, in my opinion. I really don't. I don't think they are. Paradox, if they were to make a game with that many features, they would release it, and then they would release each feature as a DLC down the line. Stellaris maybe one day will have some character intrigue in it for $39.99, and you also need the other $50, $20 DLC so that you can actually play the game. Right? So I don't like Paradox's business practices, and I don't like the fact that Paradox basically releases an unfinished game. That's what they do. Another thing is viability. Who would buy it? That's true. Strategy games are niche. They are niche, man. Total War sells well, but other strategy games don't, alright? People play Hoi, people play Paradox games, that is true. But it does not have the mass market appeal of another game. But I think if you could make something that is both complex and simple. What do I mean by simple? By simple, I mean the game and the calculations and everything that has to be done in the background to make everything work is simple, but the depth is complex. You could have a good strategy game without as much of like the code monkey effort. The biggest thing that I think stops people from making good games, just sitting down and like sinking time in and trying to make a game, is the fact that it can never be a one-man thing. It can only be a one-man thing if you're going to make some kind of 2D indie game. And I could develop a rule set like I am right now for what is essentially a tabletop game, but instead of on the tabletop with little miniatures or anything like that, it's done on the computer with your Paint.net client, for example, or any other image editing software. That's what I'm doing. I'm creating a rule set for people to do all of the calculations and all of the movements by hand. But if you could make a game that could do that, the biggest issue would be not only do you need to code it, not only do you need to make it work, you also need art assets. You also need sound design. You need like a bunch of people on board with your project. And then guess what? You ever start a project with some people and then you notice you're the last guy who's working on it? That happens a lot because most people, unless they're really passionate about something, are just kind of going to give up, after a while, or they're just going to lose interest in it. There is a Legend of the Galactic Heroes game. I used to have it before I wiped my hard drive. If I still had it installed, I'd launch it up right now and play a little bit for you guys. It's only in Japanese, though. It's not been translated to English. RL? Fortune Zero. RL. What game is that? RL. Pay to win and the rest is hard grind. What game are you talking about, Fortune? Tell me, RL. I don't know what that stands for. Total War Rome 1 plus CK2. Yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect. That would be perfect. If somebody would make Total War Rome 1 plus CK2. In real life. Yeah, real life is pay to win and the rest is hard grind. That's true. That's true. I agree with that. Total War, Rome 1 and Medieval 2 have better campaigns than the other games, even though their campaigns are easier because they have less bullshit and they do have complexity. It's just the complexity is bare bones. Diplomacy is lacking, but your generals have tons of character traits and your generals are really dynamic. Your city building, settlement building in Total War Rome and Medieval is wonderful. You can build whatever you want. Your development progress is based on your population, so your taxes, so much stuff is based on good numbers. Now, do you necessarily need that? No. But it is a good thing. It's a good thing to add. It makes things more interesting. You don't really need population in a Total War campaign. I mean, it's good information to put in there. Of course, I'm in the mindset right now of how do I simplify everything for something that I need to do calculations by hand. Once you get a computer, do you really have an excuse? Once you're having a computer, a game, a program run things for you automatically, you should put in population. You should put in complicated stuff. You can get as complicated as you want because the computer's doing it for you. But with this, what's on screen, as you can see, there's a lot that's been done to keep it complicated but simple, where I don't have like an absurd amount of hit points on each ship, for example. I have an amount of hit points that is easy to keep track of when you're doing this by hand. When something is done by hand, the rules need to be simple. They need to be simple, but they have to have depth. With a game, you can do anything. The computer's doing stuff. The player does not need to know the exacts of everything. They can just know the vague sort of, this is what it's going to do. That's another issue with strategy games, is sometimes they give you more information. I think that strategy games should be more vague, especially with reconnaissance. You're given too much information in strategy games. This is why metas develop. In Hoi 4, when you're making a division, you get all of this information on its soft attack and its hard attack. And that's how you figure out how to make the perfect meta 40 width combat division to do this, to do that, to do this, to do that. And instead of having strategy, you just have, okay, this is the division I'm going to make because this is what everybody else is going to make. This is the best, the most effective. Because once you reveal the calculations to the player, you lose a bit of magic, in my opinion. So I would much prefer, having designation for weapons and having all of those numbers running in the background, but they're in the background. Now this reminds me of good old Terry Davis videos. Well, I'm not crazy, AAT Roger. I'm not going to die getting hit by a train. God bless Terry Davis, man. I actually want to buy I found a Temple OS hat. I want to buy that. The next time I get a little bit of cash injection, I'm going to buy that hat. Yeah, Cream, absolutely. Rome 1 had interesting character development. It's just the character development needs to go farther, right? You need to have, again, think about history. Think about history, man. Read about Gettysburg. We might end up watching Gettysburg, okay? We might end up watching Gettysburg in the Discord tonight, which is 4 hours. So I'm going to do a revote when we get everybody in the voice channel. And we're like, okay, guys, everybody ready to watch the movie? And we'll be like, hey, so who voted for Gettysburg? And if the majority didn't vote for Gettysburg, we're not watching Gettysburg. I love Gettysburg. It's a great movie, but it's 4 hours, okay? It's 4 hours. But if you know about the Battle of Gettysburg, there was a lot of debate between Robert E. Lee and his subordinates, I forget all of their names, over whether or not Lee's plan was the right one or not. And you could argue, as people have argued for, the past more than 100 years, about it, whether or not Lee's plan would have been successful if it had been executed perfectly. But guess what? It wasn't executed perfectly. In real life, there is natural decentralization, right? I want a strategy game where you have to command subordinates. You have subordinates that are under you, and those subordinates are going to be most effective and most efficient when they trust you, when they respect you, when they like you, and when, most importantly, they think your order is reasonable. That's how it is in real life, okay? That's how it is in real life. If you don't have discipline, if you don't have respect, if somebody does not think what you've just ordered them to do is the right thing, you might get an ineffective execution of that order. And that might make that order worthless, all right? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If your subordinate does not believe in your order, he's going to go into that order like, this is going to get me killed. And then guess what happens? He gets killed. Now, is that proof that your order was bad? No, your order could have been successful under a different leader. Strategy games put you in the position of a demigod, usually, where you are in control absolutely of everything on screen. Your men break morale. Morale is something that happens, but your officer never says, suicide charge? I don't think so. So I think it would be interesting to have a strategy game where it's narrative based, the scenario is kind of pre-mapped out, and though it has a lot of divergent points depending on your decisions, you have a battle, you have a situation, you have to give orders, and there might be some disagreement, and you might have to deal with that. The brain feed unit to move, like in most Total War games. Yeah, Fortune, I know what you mean. I mean, how I'm doing that in this Discord game, right, is that we are not decentralized enough to have captains of specific ships. That would that would require some serious mobilization and some serious autism. But we do have admirals of every fleet, which means there is a guy who is the High Admiral, and he commands every fleet. He has his personal fleet, then he commands all the other fleets, which means he's going to have to order everybody else around. That's a big thing of being a commander, is dealing with subordinates. And subordinates, not like in real life, they're not robots. They'll obey your order, most likely, but they might not execute it well enough. Part of being a good commander is knowing how to order around your subordinates. I read Battlefield Leadership, great, really short PDF. It's from like 1910. It's written by some German guy. And he writes about how, you need to know how to order your commanders. Some commanders, you just need to say, hey, here's your objective. And then your commander, he gets it, right? And he says, okay, that's my objective. And then he goes about creating his own plan on how to take that objective, on how to do what you want him to do. Other generals, or, well, not generals, but other subordinates, you'll give them an order, and you have to tell them exactly what to do. That isn't a bad thing necessarily, but like, they're not going to come up with their own way. They want to play everything by the book. So you have to explain to them all the parameters and what they should do, etc., etc. You need to know to send that order to the right guy instead of sending that order to the wrong guy. You send a detailed plan to a subordinate who has a lot more initiative. He's going to find a bunch of holes with it, and he's not going to fulfill the objective as effectively as he could. Some people need a lot of guidance. Other people don't need much guidance at all. That's a lot of command. That's what I got from Battlefield Leadership. Andrew Johnson, yeah, you're right. I mean, right now what I'm doing for this Discord is I'm basically developing a rule set for a tabletop game. Subordinates that disobey get shot. Again, it's not disobedience, bloodlust. It is ineffective completion of the order, right? It is not going all the way with the order. Think about the Battle of Gettysburg, right? And how, maybe if everybody was Robert E. Lee's, lifeless robot puppet, the plan would have worked. But it didn't in real life. And there's a lot of debate and discussion on that. But a lot of people would chalk up certain elements of the battle's loss to commanders doing one thing instead of another. Not that they did an entirely different thing, but if they were a little more trusting or a little more, going all the way along with what they were ordered to do, things might have turned out differently. Have I played Distant Worlds? No, I haven't played Distant Worlds. I'm going to have to look up Distant Worlds and Divinity Dragon Commander after this video, because those definitely sound good. I'm going to change the title. Alright, stream titles now. Sobieski is talking about strategy games and playing them. Better application would be Jutland and the Foul-Up with Beatty. Again, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I have some other examples. If I were to make like a video about this topic, I would have a ton of examples, but Gettysburg is the first one that comes to my head, because they really drive that point home in the Gettysburg movie, and when you read about it, same thing. Let me go into OBS real quick, and I'm going to switch this to an image. Let me put an image on screen. That way I can do some stuff on screen without you guys seeing. Hopefully you lads don't get mad about that. Where's that silly picture I have as the thumbnail? Yeah. Friendly fire, man. Look, he shot his boy. Oops. Improper signaling and improper target engagement. Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing you never see in strategy games. You never see any of the mishaps and mistakes that you see when you read about real war. And I mean, it's a game, so things need to be streamlined and simplified, but I feel like it would be interesting to have to deal with those factors too, in a simplified, semi-streamlined way. Yeah, Gettysburg is where the South basically lost. It depends on who you ask, but yeah, that's where the Confederate Army was beaten by the Union Army, and after that things really started to fall apart. But you could argue that it didn't matter who was going to win at Gettysburg, because the naval blockade and some of the shenanigans happening in the South due to the Union Army, things were kind of grim. But I think there are some points where the Confederacy could have very easily won. Chain of command where you have to dice for everything. Yeah, another issue is that the player still needs to have some control, right? So RNG is a good way to put things out slightly outside of player control. I would want a system where there is a dice roll, but if you have a subordinate that really trusts you and is really well disciplined, that subordinate is going to do everything properly. Everything properly. That guy is not going to falter, right? So you have to overlay the statistics, and you have to overlay all of these calculations alongside some random number generation. And you want to keep all of that in the background, because I don't want somebody to know that their subordinate is going to act perfectly. That's another thing. The player should not know perfect information. The player should not be a demigod. The player should have inaccurate reconnaissance. The player should have inaccurate information. The player should have to work with what they get, and if they want additional information, they have to work for it. Yeah, that's a big thing. Bloodlust, yeah, with friendly fire. A game where you can get friendly fire like that is in Arma if you turn off the option to have friendly units show up on your map. More of a limit to the effectiveness of your orders. Yeah, I think that should be limited, Andrew, but I think that depending on other player decisions and player efforts, there should be a higher limit to certain subordinates, etc., etc. Like, I want to have a game where you have to deal with the necessary decentralization of a military, command, or of a nation, of running a nation, because not one guy calls the shots. Even back in the day when you had absolute monarchs and kings, it wasn't just one guy calling the shots. Now, that one guy had a lot of say, but a lot of tasks had to be just, given over to subordinates. I'm going to be going into the military soon, so I assume I'll learn a lot of stuff about how the present U.S. military works. Anyway, since we're talking about strategy games, and I gotta briefly check my Discord. Maybe some people will join this game. If you want to join this game, I'm going to go ahead and post the link in announcements. So that's the Discord link. If anybody wants to join, it is now in the announcements of the Sobieski Discord, Crisis of the Second Federation. We need a few more players to get things off the ground to play some more political characters, though they will most likely have military command in the scenario that is probably going to unfold. But things are still unpredictable on my end, even though I'm running the game because of the fact that players are involved and players aren't held by a leash. I'm joining active duty, Edward Ryan. So here's the Discord link in the chat now for the strategy game if anybody wants to join. And here is the Discord, or wait, let me get the vetting link. That's what I need. Here's the community Discord link. If anybody wants to join the community Discord, there you go. Avalon Hill games, huh? Well, thank you for the recommendations, Andrew Johnson. I'm going to check those out. Chain of Command and... yeah, Chain of Command, Avalon Hill, Divinity Dragon Commander. I got to write these down somewhere. I guess I can rewatch the stream. All right, let me grab a... let me see if there's anything I want to show. Anything I want to show on screen. I don't really have anything downloaded that... I have Hoi downloaded only to play multiplayer, really, and to try out some of the mods. Black Ice makes the game excessively complicated, kind of in a good way, kind of in a bad way. I have the Total War games installed, but I haven't played one of those in a while. We were playing Shogun 2 last stream. That was pretty interesting. RTS games are like click per minute, man. I've played some 40k Soulstorm with Ultimate Apocalypse mod. You don't really get time to think about anything. It's all just click, 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 click. How fast can you click, man? That is the game. Got Darkest Hour installed, but none of the mods I usually play for it installed. Don't have CK2 installed because I'll have to go on the Russian website and acquire all of the DLC. Old-time Grognard, former Marine, Flames of War is... okay, Flames of War, alright. Okay, I'll put those down on a list somewhere, man. Anyway, we're nearing 50 minutes here. This is a real short stream. I just wanted to pitch the idea to some of you guys. Hopefully it's been enjoyable. Before I go, I want to just say a few more things about my nearing, military service stuff, okay? So I'm joining the Army in August. So in a month, less than a month, like a week basically. Once I get my ship date, I'll know when I'm getting the hell out of here and going through basic and all that stuff. I'm going active duty, which means my time may or may not be limited to do stuff like this YouTube, right? I might not be able to make as many YouTube videos. I already don't make too many while I'm in the military. There's also the question of making sure that while I'm in the military, I don't do anything stupid. Because you can get kicked out of the military for your opinions, for your beliefs, whatever. Especially if you project those beliefs and opinions on social media. So, you can't... I got to be careful. I'm going to be careful. My online presence is mostly going to be private and anonymous while I'm in the military. I'm not going to try to do anything loud. I'm not going to do anything stupid because... This is what I'm doing in life. I've got to get through it. Once I'm out of the military, I'll be as loud as I want. Loud and proud, man. Well, pride's a sin, so I might want to avoid that. But I think I will have some time on my hands depending on what I do. I know that if I do something in the Army that is basically just a civilian job in camis, I will have time, but I'll have a normal work schedule. I know if we go into a combat ops rule... that though I probably won't be deployed to combat, there is a chance, but garrison duty can be easy, or garrison duty can be a pain in the ass based on your commander. And then there's, of course, field exercises. I actually like the idea of field exercises. Apparently either you love them or you hate them. That's what I've got from talking to people. You are a dolphin trainer. Don't admit to being a soldier. Easier that way. All right, well, lads, thank you for tuning in to this very quick, very short stream. Just wanted to sort of pitch things, see if anybody else is interested. Hopefully some more people will join if you want to try it out. It's definitely something that I'm sinking a bit of time into. I'm also sinking my time into other productive things. I'm just trying to be more productive. I'm sick of sitting around doing nothing, playing games, staring at the screen. I want to make things, and if those things are fictional and thus not really don't have as much substance as working on non-fictional stuff, but still, it's something. I think I'm going to have an actual pretty good video out within a week. So by next weekend, I should have something that's edited, something that's good. Might be related to Rhodesia, might be related to World War II, might be related to something else in Africa, might be related to something entirely different. I don't know yet, but I'm going to work on that. I'm going to push that out. Another thing is I'm going to try and make sure it can stay monetized. I'm not going into the Marines, Ryan. I'm not going into the Marines. There's less money you can exploit out of the Marines. I want to be Uncle Sam's neat, and to do that, I need to maximize my my cash pulling in capability. Not that I'm going in for the money or anything. There's other ways that I could. There's other things I could do that would get me more money. Another issue with the Marines is you don't get to necessarily pick what you're gonna be. I'm probably gonna go into armor, for example. I like big tanks. Anyway, lads, a local Biafran liberation group. That's very interesting, Fortune. If you're on my Discord, tell me about that. Keep me posted on that information. Biafra is very, very cool. I'll see you guys around. I'm going to end the stream now. Have a nice one.